Well, good morning and welcome. We have a great mini session between today, Monday, and Tuesday, all on increasing our career branding. Now, today we're going to start with resume renovation. Resume is typically the first chance of them to really get a sense of who you are, what you offer, why you're different, why you're really valuable. So resume has a very important place within the positioning of our story, and we have to really think about that. Resume's job, to be clear, is to deliver the interview. If it's delivering the interviews that you want, that's terrific. If it's not, likely needs to change. So we're going to show you how to really take control today, take back the power for yourself, beginning with the resume. As you can see right here, you can join me today for resume renovation, also on replay. And of course, building your professional network with LinkedIn and how to use it for your career branding launching pad. So we're going to start with today's story on resume. We're continuing expanding that story on Monday with LinkedIn. And then Tuesday, we're going to handle all different questions that you may have surrounding career branding itself. So let's jump right in on this happy Friday. This is resume renovation. You know, when I was naming this, I was thinking about the challenge, and I thought about, fixing things up, because that's what really we typically do to a resume, is fix things up a little bit. And that's not really going to solve the problems. We need a full renovation. We need something similar to breaking down right down to the studs, and let's rethink how we're going to use this document, this marketing tool about you. Solving resume issues requires two things. It requires a paradigm shift in both the story idea itself. What are you going to say about yourself? How are you going to convey those points that make you look really exceptional, elevate your career brand? And how are you going to make sure the formatting supports that? Because the formatting is critically important too. And of course, now in today's modern world, we're going to have to show that we can be effective remotely, whether that's working from home a few days a week or remotely full time, or just being able to interact with people at a distance. Now, if you haven't really done a lot of that in your past, I'm not sure what you've been doing the last 2 or 3 years, because we've had a lot of that going on. But maybe you've been with one of those organizations that didn't do it remotely, so you still don't have remote story. Well, you're going to have to go back and retell so that they can get how you could be effective in a remote setting, whether it's one of these things, maybe managing, offsite vendors, clients, all those relationships, or maybe it's even what I'm doing here today. Maybe you've spoken with internal or external audiences, or done conference calls or webinars, or all of those things are also a way to show that you can be very effective in a remote stance. That story has to come back into our natural story on the resume and LinkedIn. And that's only going to happen through a paradigm shift in storytelling. This is not the way we used to tell it, but we have to tell it this way now, or we're going to lose our audience very, very quickly. In case you haven't seen me before, John Crant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru branding as well. So if you are suffering from poor storytelling, which most people are across their resume, across their LinkedIn profile, if you're not able or not really ready to do it yourself, gosh, reach out. I'd be happy to work with you. Check out on my Self-Recruiter website, right over under the services tab. You'll find all my packages. More about my background as we move along. A couple resources that'll help you. Of course, my book's a really good resource, Self-Recruiter, Changing the Rules. I'm a big believer in changing any rule that does not work for us. Oh, that rule works? Oh, I love that rule. Love that rule. Love that rule. That rule doesn't work for me. That's for somebody else. I'm just going to step over the fence or around the corner, but that rule doesn't apply to me. I change any rule that doesn't work for me. Book's a great resource. You can see it over on my website, over on Amazon as well. Over on my LinkedIn, you can click through a number of different things that will get you to different articles that will even back up today's lecture or the branding lecture on Monday, or many other things that you may face in your job search. So do check those out on LinkedIn, and please do like and comment and share and all that kind of fun stuff. Now, one other resource before we jump into today. This is a very special version of my LinkedIn lecture. Now, I am giving this lecture on Monday, but it won't be this version because they're all a little bit different. This one's a special version where you can see me large or the slides large. It's right on my homepage of selfrecruiter.com, about halfway down the page. Really, it's the best version to use as a start and stop tutorial if you're going to improve your own LinkedIn. Also, will reinforce a lot of what we talk about today on resume. So let's get into today's session, which is really about being a self-recruiter. How is it that I'm going to become one great recruiter that looks over one amazing candidate, and both of them are me, and I also have to be the planner, the strategist, the cheerleader. I have to pick myself up by those bootstraps and dust myself off when necessary. All that kind of fun stuff. But the bulk of becoming a self-recruiter is networking in a very different way than we have in the past. And that's really the proper use of LinkedIn. So tune in Monday, 10 a.m. for that one, or watch it on the homepage. And the other part of becoming a self-recruiter is always keeping one eye on the toughest competitor imaginable. 4, 5, or 6 people scare you out of applying for that job. They're going for it. Oh, forget it. That person, we can beat those people so easily. Those perfect people. Have you met one? I'm not sure I've met one yet. I mean, I like to be perfect too, but no one's perfect. We're human beings. We are defective by nature. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us human. So there are no perfect people, and those perfect people suffer from something called ego and arrogance. They wake up in the morning, they dust themselves off, and they don't actually prepare. What they do is they get dressed. A little bit of planning, a little bit of forethought, a little bit of maneuvering. You can outmaneuver them very, very quickly because they really don't do their homework. They don't plan ahead. They don't get ready for your challenge. Oh, we'd all like to go after the job, see the job, really get the job if it was really that easy. But everybody's sitting there doing the same thing you're doing. They're hitting that darn button. Rarely, by the way, does it say apply. It almost always says submit. All capital letters until we're so submissive. It's like a Friday night waiting for that phone to ring. Oh, it's gonna ring. It's a telemarketer when it does. This is a rut that we have to get ourselves out of. This is something that's going to leave us in a very unhappy place. Now, when I would give my in-person lessons, I'd ask out to the audience, well, how are you feeling about your resume? Or LinkedIn, or whatever the subject matter of the day is. And all of these things would be shouted out to me. And I'm like, oh, that's not very uplifting. No, not very uplifting at all, but it is reality. And we have to start with reality, or we can't actually solve our problem. So you may be feeling many of these things, but it comes from a lack of control. And we're going to apply that first layer of control to the story on your resume. That's going to return some of the power to you. So whatever it is that's holding you back, whether you got laid off or whatever it might be, get over it. There's better things ahead. Maybe quit looking so much in the rearview mirror. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, if I only did. Oh, yes, if there's some things to correct or change for the future, we should. But then we have to take our eyes off that rearview mirror and look just over the horizon, because our opportunity is just waiting for us if we can get over the baggage of whatever happened to us in the past. Now, in terms of retelling your story, we have to think about the usual versus the unusual, unconventional versus conventional, expected versus unexpected. And we're going to have to take a different route. If we just present it as normal, that's not going to be very persuasive. Most resumes I see are not very persuasive. The right resume has this effect. I'm going through a stack of resumes. We'll get into those numbers coming right up. Going through the stack of resumes, I'm almost droning out because it's like snow blindness, resume blindness, few dozen, few hundred. I can't tell anybody apart. Droning out, and then suddenly I get to your resume, which is the right resume. And suddenly I'm like, oh, get them in here. Get them on the phone. I don't even know what I'm reacting to yet, but I'm having some visceral reaction here. There's value here. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I have to speak with them. That's the right resume. The right resume isn't a summary, a biography, a laundry list of everything you've ever done since kindergarten. It's just the right morsels and nuggets of your story to make them want to jump out of the chair. So they just have to speak to you. They just couldn't not speak to you. That's being persuasive. And you can do it on your resume, but you have to find your confidence to do it. Confidence is something we all struggle with as human beings. Some of us have a little more of it. Some of us have a little less of it. Well, let's talk about why the resume really matters and how we're going to get this confidence onto the resume. I mean, aren't we in a digital world now? Does the resume, do I have to have one of these things? Only if you'd like to be hired. Yes, you have to have a resume. Resume still tends to be the first point of contact. Not always. Sometimes it's LinkedIn. Great LinkedIn profile can draw a lot of attention. Most people do not have a great LinkedIn profile. They have a cursory or shell of a story up there, kind of a placeholder. Like someday the real story is going to be here. Like, what are we waiting for? Let's make the real story there today. But resume still matters because it does tend to be that first point of contact, first chance for us to take control of the discussion. Don't let them just talk about you whatever way they might conclude. Why don't you help them speak about you in the ways you'd like them to think about you? Now, before we take on the real challenge, you have to understand what is this immense wall that we're facing. So let's look at the actual numbers. If you look at that, you'll really understand the challenge. So as we look at it, if this is any kind of a decent job, that's 1,000 to 2,000 resumes being sent in for that job. Now, I hope you listen clearly. I did not say 1,000 to 2,000 qualified candidates. Oh, no. 95% of these resumes are absolutely not right for this job. Well, what are they doing here? Clogging up the entire system, creating snow blindness, resume blindness. Well, you see a great job and you go, oh, that's a great job. I know because of that job, they have another great job around that would be right for me. I'm going to send my resume in. So they go, oh, we need a person just like this one too. And that reaction causes 95% of the resumes not being right, but somewhere around that job, which leaves the 5 to 10% that are right. Boy, they're at a real disadvantage of getting noticed when you have all this distraction. But we still don't have a full grasp on what we're dealing with here. I have to say this every time I speak at the public library, and I just wait to get struck by lightning. Who can read? I know that portends some awful things for our future. No one wants to read any longer. I mean, I can send someone can ask me a question over email. I can send them 2 sentences of a paragraph, small paragraph back. The answer is right in the middle of it. And they ask me again, who can read? Who can read? No one will read today. So let's go back to this challenge. Who can read 1,000 emails, 1,000 resumes, 1,000 cover letters, and do all their own work? I don't know anybody that can do all that, but you're still not pulling the real challenge into focus. Because if you're dealing with a recruiter, that's an internal or external, doesn't really matter. It could be a headhunter like I was, external. It could be internal recruiter. If their title is recruiter, they typically are working on 10 open jobs at the same time. That's how it works. That's how it functions. I have 10 spots to fill at the same time. Those are not 10 spots that I have the background in. No. Those are 10 spots I'm actively trying to fill that I'm trying to guess which one goes where. You're going to let that type of person that doesn't understand you working on 10 open jobs at the same time, who can't possibly read 10,000 emails, 10,000 resumes, 10,000 cover letters, you're going to let them determine your future? I'm not a fan of that. So, by the way, in real job search, I'm a much bigger fan of reaching directly out to the decision maker, not the HR person. We'll talk a lot more about that on Monday's LinkedIn, because that's really where you do it. So now you have a little bit of sense of no one can actually read all of this stuff. So they're relying on that applicant tracking system, tagged like a little animal running through the forest. Okay, they're relying on that system. You have seconds with your resume, seconds to capture their interest. Oh, get them in here. Get them on the phone. I can't move ahead without speaking to this person. Does your resume do that? Does your resume grab them? A lot of mistakes with resumes, and we have to talk about mistakes to understand what to fix. A lot of the mistakes are people are just, I'll be cookie cutter perfect. I'll just be perfect. I can slide right in there. Perfect. That's great. I'll take number three. I'm paying you less. No, you don't want less. Okay. Number two, number 5, doesn't really matter. You're all interchangeable, cookie cutter perfect. You're getting less money. You have to somehow, of course, be cookie cutter perfect, interchangeable, but somehow also be different, exceptional, special in your storytelling. That's how you get a different compensation, a different maybe set of responsibilities, maybe even a different higher level title you may be after. So it's not simply a couple hours work and you have your new resume. I don't want to set that expectation for you. It is a couple hours work and you have your first iteration of your new resume, and you very likely need 4, 5, maybe even 6 iterations of the resume to get to the right version of the resume. Get him in here. Get him on the phone. I have to speak with this person. Can't move forward without speaking to them. Don't stop too soon. And if this is not the right challenge for you, then work with someone that can do it for you and create a dazzling story from your career background. Small changes change perception. Just don't sit there with a dead story that doesn't go anywhere. So a lot of talk about this word story, which has a little bit of a negative connotation because we tend to think about things being made up. Not what I'm talking about here. I can tell you the same very truthful, absolutely truthful story in the most dull way possible. Or I could tell you where you're like on the edge of your seat, dripping on every single word, listening and can't wait for the next. You've got to go back because you've told your story the same way for so long. You've got to go back and rediscover your story, rebuild your own confidence because you've been beaten down so much over time. Now, I do this with my clients. If I'm reinventing a client's resume or LinkedIn, this is exactly how we start, and this is how I'd recommend for you. You start with a deep dive interview. This is an interview where everything's on the table. This isn't a traditional interview. This is a information dump. We're trying to find everything, every little piece of information that somehow slipped away, got tossed away, got hidden away. Oh, don't look at that one. We have to go back and find all of those pieces so that we can assess what the new story should be. So yeah, close for inventory. Now with my clients, this is about a 90-minute meeting, probably about the same for you. And you're going to capture every single thing. Like, what was the first school? What happened there? What happened there? What else were you doing? Under every rock, under the bed, in the closet, we're looking for every piece of story that somehow disappeared. Yes, of course, be capable and qualified, but I'm not centering the story on the fact of being capable or qualified. Those things, I mean, anybody I would consider for this role should certainly meet the capable or qualified, or I shouldn't even be looking. That's not a decision factor. The decision factor is much more once I feel you're capable or qualified. So we have to satisfy it. Why are you interesting? What makes you tick? What drives you, especially? Which could have something very closely to do with what you do professionally, could have nothing to do with what you do professionally. And still, it's a deciding factor in how we make a new relationship with a new employee. So when I do this with my clients, I walk away with about 8 or 9 pages of notes. I'd expect you to do about the same, capture every single thing, because you want to look at the angle as if I don't know this person, I have to reinvent them. So on that 8 or 9 pages of notes, maybe it is as simple as grabbing a highlighter, being very stingy with this highlighter. And what rises to the level of being one of the best business decisions they're ever going to make today if they choose to hire me? What rises to that level to convince them? Oh, a highlight here, a highlight here. Drop of perfume, nugget of gold, and ruby, diamond, emerald. That's what I'm looking for. Across 8 or 9 pages of notes, a few little highlights, you probably have the core content right there under highlight that has to make the resume. Everything else is negotiable. All these notes are really different ways to look at your branding, all the different ways that separate you out from other people. Which elements should you talk about? Which elements do you let disappear into the background? The minutia that you let disappear so the rest of the story has more clarity. You're going to filter all of this background through one singular lens, which you've already heard me mention. That is, why is it going to be the best business decision they're going to make today if they choose to hire me? So I look for that filter, and everything that goes ding, 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 those elements come to the forefront. I reinvent the story. Now, here's a typical resume, like getting hit in the head with a brick. I got hit in the head with a brick at the New York Public Library with this resume right after presenting this lecture. Someone comes up to me and they go, I've been told all I can expect is more of this. And they present the resume to me. Now, as you probably already have noticed, if it's your first time, I'm highly caffeinated. I'm passionate about what I speak about. And my in-person lectures tend to be 60 to 90 minutes. So a lot of energy. And suddenly I get this resume, this brick in the head, and I'm like, I'm going to fall asleep. I better ask a question. It'd be rude to fall asleep. What would you like to do? Well, let's just make this resume a little bit larger. There we go. I'm me holding this resume. And the person goes, oh, I'd like to work in events. And the first thing I say is, oh, have you ever worked in events? Ouch. I'm me holding the resume. If I'm me holding the resume and I can't see events coordinator on this resume, how do you think any other human being could possibly see this on this resume? All they see is, oh, law firm, like there's law firm and there's law firm. Oh, these are law firms. Money. I see a couple of them and I go, more law firm for you. You're a law firm person, more law firm for you in your future. That's all I see. Okay. Well, that's a terrible mistelling of the story that didn't bring us any value. That's partly what they've done. Even if I zoom in, it doesn't really help my digestion of this story. But once I clarify, this is the same exact person. When I said, have you ever done events? Oh, of course I've done events. I'm an event specialist. Okay, I didn't get that from the resume, even though it said it. I didn't see event planning. I didn't see the photo shoots. I didn't see the Heller Gallery, Lincoln Center, Met, Morgan Library Museum. I didn't see all of that dazzle. I didn't see that you were a speaker wrangler. Speaker wrangler? Who are you wrangling on? Ted Koppel, Charlie Rose. Well, you got to change a few of those names over time. Oh my gosh, where was this story? Well, this story was right there, buried in a wall of text, hitting you in the head like a brick. That's the transformation. That's the dramatic change that has to happen, because we're a product, and a product has to have a clear vision. Who are you? What are you all about? That's how you create engagement, which is a lot closer to this style engagement. Let me come back to the big screen here. Yes, job search is very similar to dating. It's two things we don't like. It's sales process, which nobody likes, and it's a dating process, which nobody likes. Ugh. Two worst things in the world. Small changes change perception. So we're going to use our personal branding, our approach to our brand, and all those things that can maybe separate ourselves from others to really set the stage. Now, here I've pulled a few resumes just off the internet. Someone was collecting them over on Pinterest. I'm like, oh, I like resumes too. Let's take a look. So it's almost easier to show you how to fix your resume once I throw some darts at these resumes and tell you really what's wrong with them. And for that, let's go back to the little screen and much larger resume. So first off here, kudos to Kelly. Name is big, bold. I can't miss it. Yes, I took off the last name. Figured you didn't need that there. So kudos to Kelly. Can't miss that brand, but not sure shades of yellow was really the right choice, because hard to look at on screen. And also when I print it out, it's shades of gray. So that doesn't really work well. And that's the last positive thing I have to say about this resume. This resume suffers from something that most resumes suffer from. And it's called a complete lack of attention or consideration to something called information architecture. Just like a building, big building that, I'm in a 20-story building right now. It's not an amazing giant building, but hey, it's a building. And you know what? You can't build a 20-story building without working out all those details, with working out the plumbing, the electric, and everything else that has to function. But here, I start down this resume and we didn't consider the architecture. Should I get on the left column first and go down and then top right again on my left and go over? And I have seconds, and this does not work from a storytelling format. Now, Julia here, now, I'll just say up front, I didn't write these comments that are down at the bottom of these resumes, but this one, in case you can't read it, says, who said the name had to be at the top anyway? Well, I'll say it. If you're unsure, the name has to be at the top. Big believer in changing any rule that does not work for us. However, this is a rule you cannot change. There are some rules you cannot change, because when I'm sitting with a stack of resumes, I'm looking at name, employer title, education, a reverse half moon. You can't violate that when it's stack after stack after stack. So yes, Julia will get noticed, but then right away she has an information architecture problem. Am I supposed to continue down below, then go up top? And you know what? I cannot actually see her employers. Now you might say, well, John, those are blurred out. Yes, I get that. I mean, even if they're not blurred out, I can't see them. Oh, I could intellectually go find them. I have seconds. Do you think I'm going to intellectually go find your employers to figure out your value? Almost every ounce of your value comes from who you did it for, not the title itself. So if you did it for very impressive brands, even if they were lousy, impressive things are thought of you. If you did it for brands no one's heard of, no one has heard of you. So this doesn't really work. Another problem with Julia's resume here is the only reason I would rule you out is the main reason, is the main item of content that you put within my iPath. Remember that reverse half moon? What's in the iPath here? The dates The dates are expected on a resume, but dates are never a reason I hire you. Dates are only a reason I don't hire you. So while they're expected, why would you put them over in front of their eyes if they can only hurt you and not help you? Put them as far away from their eyes as possible. Make them smaller. Please don't make them bold. Don't look here. So that's not really going to work well for Julia here. Martin. Kudos to Martin on his brand. I've seen this version of resume over the decades many times. This format has been floating around for forever. I'm not sure if it was worth 25% of the entire real estate to tell me your name and contact information, even though it did create a great brand presence, but that's gimmickry. So poor choice on using real estate. I'd rather use that real estate to tell me why you're so dazzling. Then, of course, we've got an information architecture problem with the blue column and the next column next to it. Am I supposed to read down or read over? How's it supposed to work? And if I simply tell you what I can actually see, which is education, internship, and personal skills, that is just gimmickry and labeling that has nothing to do with your value. Your story should be pulling the focus like those labels, not labels. So again, this is a failure, to say the least. You have seconds to make them jump out of the chair. None of those will make them jump out of the chair unless they are reaching for the wastebasket. Resume, it's about catching or piquing that interest. LinkedIn, it's about closing the deal in their mind. We'll give you a lot more to think about in terms of that. All of this is about influencing them. So back to personal branding, and now we're going to really break it down to how we're going to take a resume like this and transform it into something that brings the clarity forward. So even as you think about your story and how things are going to move forward, it's clarity and influence. That's a clarity on your career path in the story, and we got to influence them about how they think about your value. So think about this one and think about how you feel absorbing what you're seeing here, and then think about, well, that creates the engagement, that gets them excited, that gets them to go get them on the phone. I have to speak with this individual. Let's go to your resume renovation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to create a winning resume. Now, we're going to blow through these first 5 steps very, very quickly and then come back to everyone with more details. So let's go right in. You are a product 2. Resume, the new definition, your resume's goals, understanding stacks of resumes. That's what happens after you push that darn submit button. And of course, the 3-second test for resumes. Let's go right back to the beginning. You are a product 2. When a company chooses to hire you, they're buying a product, or at least they're buying your time and talents. I think we get that part, even if we don't like the concept. Would you rather be the store brand? Think about going to the grocery store. You want to be that store brand, the label and the design and the coloring. It's always a little bit off, a little bit off, a little bit off, close, but a little bit off. Taste, always, it's close, but a little bit off, a little bit off. Price, I love the price. Price is very good. Would you rather be that store brand, or would you rather be the national brand, the Coca-Cola, the Folgers, the Kellogg's, that commands the higher price, has the better taste? Which product do you want to elevate yourself to be? That's the first thing you have to think about. Resume, the new definition. Well, we have this old concept of resumes that doesn't work any longer. It is something much simpler, simple sales sheet that creates desire. Not tells your whole story, not tells everything since childhood, gets the conversation for you. Now, your resume's goals. Now, its mission is to deliver that interview. That's different. But if it's going to deliver on the mission, it has to have goals. And the goals are simple, a clear, clean, straightforward format. This is a format where the information itself, that information that you think would be, well, not the stuff you like most, but the things that you think would be of most interest to the decision maker, those things get pulled over and highlighted in such a way that they can just be absorbed. Of course, have to clearly inform about educational background. That's part of it as well. Understanding stacks of resumes. What does happen when you hit that darn submit button? Now, to be clear, I'm not thrilled when I hear one of my clients is applying online for a job. I'm like, what? No, I don't want my clients to apply online. Yes, I realize some will, but why don't you take the extra effort, which I teach on Monday's LinkedIn session, on reaching directly out to that decision maker? You could have a 90-second conversation with the decision maker. They know exactly why you're right for this role, or not. Can't talk yourself into a role you're not right for. But that's a very different conversation than someone screening you in HR. So when we do send it in, if you don't listen to me and you send off your resume to that darn submit button, what happens? Well, first thing is maybe I can come a little bit larger here. Sorry about that. First thing is, of course, it's going to go off toward this gigantic black hole in space called the data warehouse. And if it reaches the data warehouse, kiss that resume goodbye. Probably not likely to see that anytime soon. But on the way to the data warehouse, on the way to this gigantic black hole of resumes, it's going to stop in front of a person. And that's where we have a real test here. Real look by real person. And they're going to sort you into one of three stacks. First one is, might be somebody here, might be somebody here. Stack number one. That is the good stack, by the way. Maybe. But I have to come back, have to come back, take another look. Stack two. But they don't come back and take another look. You know why? Because I have an incoming river of new resumes. Why would I go back to this stack of folks that couldn't quite convey their value to me the first time when I have all new exciting people to look at? Stack two is a dead-end stack. Of course, stack three is a total dead-end stack. I don't know why you sent this resume in. Now, the secret you may not like to this whole process is the amount of time, 3 to 5 seconds per resume. That's the decision time between which stack do you go into. In case you didn't connect those dots, your first goal is to get your resume into stack one. If you don't get the resume into stack one, never going to be really read statistically. Cover letter, never going to be read statistically. Email, never going to be read statistically. Get yourself into stack one, still not likely for any of that stuff to be read yet. Because if we start with 1,000 to 2,000 resumes, which is great, and you're the good ones, well, that's still 50 resumes in the good stack. Let's go back to the first question. Who could read 50 resumes, 50 cover letters, 50 emails? But remember, they're working on 10 open jobs, so it's 500. No one can read any of that stuff. There's a secondary sorting process which happens, and they're going to grab your name if you made it into the good stack. They're going to go over to LinkedIn, drop you on LinkedIn. Not there? Out comes that resume over to stack two. Thank you for helping me sort you. Wait a minute. You're on LinkedIn, but it's exactly what I'm holding in my hand. Oh boy, you didn't even think about it. Out comes that resume over to stack two. If I'm looking at you on LinkedIn in this process, I'm looking for you to further persuade me. So yes, my take on LinkedIn is it has to have much, much more content typically than you'll have on the resume itself. Where is the taking the skeletal system from the resume and expanding all that flesh back to being a real three-dimensional human being in story, make it come to life, convince them that you're the best one. Get yourselves into stack one. Now, length of resume, 1 page, unless it's 2, but I hope you see that I am not happy if I see someone wanting a 2-page resume. There is no time that you need a 2-page resume. That is a confidence issue. You have a confidence problem with your story. Now, I was giving this talk, well, actually it was the LinkedIn talk over at the New York State Department of Labor a couple of years back, and resume came up because these are 2 marketing documents related all about you. And I happened to say, resume, single sheet of paper in all cases. Oh, come on. What if you got a 30-year career and you're CEO? It's never going to fit. I'm like, okay, take a breath. I hear you. But I don't think that reaction is because you don't like my answer. I think that reaction is because you find yourself sitting in the Department of Labor going, well, why am I here? How come no one can see my value? Not a surprise that this guy hires me and he sends me his stuff. It is 6 pages of my eyes bleeding. Oh my gosh. Very impressive, by the way. CEO and COO and CFO before that. 30 years of endless career he couldn't stop talking about. It's an editing problem. Or you're never getting that to a single sheet of paper. Like, boom. Of course, CEO again. For those folks out there in the audience that think you need a CV format, well, not unless you'd actually like to be hired. If you'd like to be hired, forget the CV format and go with what I'm telling you. If you'd like to frame something for your wall, by all means, develop your CV format. Now, what are we looking at on this single-page resume? We're looking at your name, which is your brand, the current or last 3 employers and titles, and your educational background. Now, here's where I test listening ability, because when I give in-person lectures, I often hear people after the lecture talking to each other go, oh, John said just put the last 3 employers and titles. I'm like, I did? When did I say that? I said what we're looking at. No, if you ask me a different question, well, John, what would you like on a resume? I am so glad you asked me. What I would like on a resume is for it to be complete from the time you entered the workforce to today. Now, that's a listening test again. I said that's what I'd like. I didn't say that was the right solution for you. If you've got work going back to the early 1970s, I don't need to see all of that, and no one else does either. You have to learn how to truncate when necessary so that the story stays alive. Now, 3 last employers and titles. Why are we putting so much focus on that? Because that's your skills that you're up to date on. That's ones we don't have to retrain you on in our minds. Now, if you have your resume, go ahead and pull it out. This is just for you, so there's no reason to be anxious. Now, before you look at the resume, you're going to look with fresh eyes as if I don't know this person, which is me. And when I tell you to stop, then just look up and tell yourself what you can communicate just from looking at that resume about this person that is you. Go ahead and take a look. And stop. And for those that didn't have the resume, you saw me go 1001 all the way to 1005. You will never get longer than that. You're in one of those 3 stacks. Most people, when I do that in live, in-person lecture, they look up like a deer in the headlights going, oh, I can't tell you anything about this person. And it's me. I'm like, well, that is a problem. It's a storytelling problem. Begins at the top of the resume. Begins with the objective statement. Statement, well, statement implies a sentence. If you haven't really gathered it already, you're going to see it in the upcoming samples I'll show you. There's not a single sentence on any resume I produce. Why would I have a sentence on a resume in a world where people don't read? So would I have objective statements? No. Like I'd like to be this someday. Nobody really cares what you'd like to be someday. Well, I care. I care. Nobody else cares. Why don't we take out all that objective statement, core competencies, highlights of all my successes since childhood? Why don't we take all that nonsense that people purposely don't read, take it out at the top of the resume, and just use a little bit of 2 or 3 lines of space to tell them exactly who we are today, which is always exactly what they're trying to hire. Not what you've been, the dead bullseye for what they're trying to hire. We're going to show you how that works. Now, we go to a normal resume, of course, brick in the head. That doesn't work very well. And you realize it's simply about learning how to change the top of the resume from the first stance. So here's a traditional objective statement. All I can actually see is profile. I can see professional experience too. But what do I get? High energy, detail oriented. High energy's gone out of that one. Drained, life drained away. But that could become clearer, simpler. High energy events planner, specialist. Oh my gosh, I get what this person is right away. By the way, they work in events now, of course, because they have a wonderful events background, even though they originally couldn't tell it. Here's a few other positioning titles. That's my new name, positioning title, replacing the objective statement. This is to position and sell you. So it's always the job you're going after. In this case, this person is going after a campaign director, media and public relations, community liaison role, and boom, it's right there in the title. Now, in this example, they've actually held those titles in the past, but you'll see other examples coming up where dead bullseye at the top, but it's very clear they've never held those titles before, even though they're qualified. That's how you make that jump. In fact, here's the version here. Accomplished sales professional, software, hardware, services, just what I'm looking for. Of course, they're not working currently in hardware, software, services. I have the whole example for this one coming up. We're going to take you through that one. So you probably have some dense thing like this that you're beginning with, and you're going to have to think about consistency and using the wrong word. Things like coordinating, coordinated, maintained, my duties. You know, duties are like duty. Nobody's interested. Inconsistencies, like sometimes having a dash, sometimes having the word to, all of those things have to be corrected. This says your attention to detail isn't there, and it disrupts the clarity of the story. If we just remove the nonsense and add clarity, you realize how the story jumps right off the page. Again, this person was so worried about becoming mature. You know, I'm becoming mature too. But we're coming so worried about maturity, got the scissors out, and they cut off Martha Stewart Living off the resume. That's the 90s. Okay, but you're more than the 90s, I can tell. So do I throw out Martha Stewart Living when I want to work in events? Of course not. Or House Beautiful Magazine, where I did event-related things at Guggenheim, or European Travel and Life Magazine, where I did more event-related things? No, of course not. Yes, the earlier stuff, I didn't need to show it. It disappeared. But don't cut off the story elements that sell you. Be really, really careful. There's also some sly ways to get that credit without disclosing those too early dates. And we have some of those samples coming up. Now, back to this resume that I told you I'd tell you the more story about. Now, this person that came to me, this is a while back, and when I first worked with them, they said, gosh, I've had a great run in contract furniture sales, like 1,000 desks type thing. But oh my gosh, I'm so done. Yet every time I send out my resume, they go, but we don't need a furniture salesperson. I'm like, well, quit talking about furniture. First off, what do you want to do? Want to work in software, hardware, services? I'm like, great field. One of the fields I used to place, by the way. And I said, have you ever done it? Yes, about 15 years ago. There may be somebody here today that has the same problem of trying to figure out how to sell 15-year-old experience. If that's your challenge, here's what it is. Now, their entire resume, since it was 10, 12 years, was almost the one job. I'm like, so we condensed it down to a super paragraph of accomplishments and removed all the furniture. Now, Price Modern as a brand, didn't know them, certainly know them now. Corporate office furnishings, there's the only words that exist. And Hayworth, of course, I knew that as a brand. Other than those three references, not a single mention of furniture. Quit talking about furniture. Talk about sales. Achieved $50 million cumulative sales to date, ranked top 10 in revenues every year since 2002, developed a strong pipeline. This is every single reason why a sales manager is going to jump out of their chair. And creating this super paragraph then allowed me to expand much earlier career story that I may not have wanted to expand originally, which then showed that I do have hardware, software, and services. Oh, this guy can step right back in. This is the bottom of a resume. I want to teach you some stuff here. Yes, there's a whole resume above this. But again, if you decide to truncate your story at some point, you may have to decide, well, where would I like to stop my story or start my story, depending on how we think about that. We decided to start this one with electronic data systems, EDS, because first off, if you don't know them, they're one of those employers. Every industry has one of those employers that you work for that company. Oh, you must be amazing. Financial services, do we know who that is? Goldman Sachs. There's one of them. So reputation is like, wow, if they hire you, you must be amazing. Okay, great place to start your story. But now look at these three prior employers. Two of these three prior employers also rise to that same stunning level. Kaiser Permanente and PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, have the same reputation that you must walk on water almost if they hired you. That is three crown jewels within eyeshot. I want to point out, and we're going to give you sizing coming up, that EDS is 10-point bold. The Systems Alliance, Pricewaterhouse, and Kaiser Permanente, that is probably 8-point bold with the titles in 7.5 italicized, with the locations probably down around 6 point. That entire three prior employers is 3/4 of 1 inch on the piece of paper. It's like ordering that fancy dessert at a very expensive restaurant. It comes out on a gigantic plate, even though the dessert's only this big. And there's like drizzle all over the plate. Then there's some sprinklies. Then there's a little cherry on top. And it's like, they won't miss it. It doesn't all have to be large. They're going to go, oh, wow. Now, let's go further down. Notice that I dropped the dates on the three prior employers because those three prior employers add 17 years of additional background. Anybody need to be 17 years older next time you interview? Not too many of us. A few of us, not too many of us. So we drop those dates in a very sly way. And that's how the brain works. The brain stops calculating based on what it sees. So it sees 1999. That's where this resume begins, 1999. Even though intellectually we know that's not true. That's how our brain treats it. And if I take off the dates there, I have to take off the dates off education because I cannot allow them to do calculations. Down on the education level here, big fan of splitting the bottom of the resume. It's one of the only effective ways to utilize a single page resume for this part of the storytelling. Notice there are 3 universities here, yet only 2 of them treat it the same. And sorry for this word coming up here, but 2 of these are degrees. And that's, this, if this was your field, you may be jumping out of your chair on that PMP on the right. Oh, PMP. Oh my gosh, that's it. In fact, tattooed on my forehead. Let's put it at the top of the resume. I get it. But that's not really what I'd recommend. And I'm sorry, the PMP does not trump the 2 degrees. It is subservient to the 2 degrees. I'm also very sure, just like the sprinkles on top of that dessert or the cherry on top of that, I'm very sure they won't miss it. And they're going to be jumping out of their seats just like you are if this is your background. Now, community involvement. I mean, come on, does that even belong here? What are you going to do? Put next hobbies, passions? Yes, I might. If you're a skydiver and a scuba diver and adventure climber and all those things, you better believe I'm going to have a line about that. Probably really good on my healthcare costs. You're probably really high energy, probably very motivated. Yeah. Besides, of course, doing all the wonderful things this person did on their resume, they had time to give back. So it's a character issue. It says something about how you'll likely do your work. So think about how you want to utilize the bottom of your resume to tell a full story. I know those good works things. We're supposed to be modest and humble about those things, and grew up Catholic, know all about modesty and humility. Wonderful, wonderful traits, by the way, for every other aspect of our life, but not job search, not career. These two areas, it works directly against you, and you have to really make sense of that. So let's recap where we began, and that is, if you're going to really solve your issues, you have to put your attention both to the story itself and fix that, but also the format. So we're going to get into the format right now and give you everything. Now, I'm going to give you sizing coming up. That is the only part that is not written down somewhere. It's not written down in my book. It's not written down in any article. You have to write it down as I say it. Before we get into the sizing, let's talk about contact lines. Single line across the resume. Should start with your LinkedIn profile, city and state, because I don't hire you because you live at 123 any street. All that can disappear. Your email address and your cell phone number. Yes, your cell phone number, not your home phone number. Even if you can't get the cell phone in your house, yes, it's your cell phone number. You get the reasoning why it's on this sheet of paper. Let's get into the sizing for all the other content. Now, everything on the page, we're going to highlight, and we're going to start by making it 10 point. So we start with everything being 10 point, and then we're going to adjust from there. So my brands, which are Good Samaritan Village, Salvation Army, United Way, those are all 10 point bold. But I hope you've noticed the rest of the line, the comma, location, and date, are not only not bold, they're certainly not 10 point. In this iteration, they're 7 point. Oh, you can have a lot of variety as long as you make a rule list. It requires a rule list. Every title is this. Every brand is this. Every bullet point is this. As long as you make a rule list and apply it consistently, you'll get done with your resume and people will just go, it just comes to life somehow. I don't get how your resume works this way. Yes, it comes from the spacing, full pre-press background before I ever went into recruiting. So I really do understand line and type and spacing and how that affects things both in a physical document like a resume and a digital document like a LinkedIn profile. So yes, you've got the sizing on those two. We're going to add spacing after the brand name, after the employer. So we're going to show you how to add the spacing in some screens coming up, but just write down the spacing. We're going to add 2 points of space after the brand before title. The title line, yes, I know this first one has a special line. We're going to come back to that one. The title line, I like a half a point less than the brand, which means it's 9.5 in size. But the mistake people make is they try to bold it. It's like, oh, yeah, that's me, bold it. No, your title is now fighting with the brand in the brain constantly. It has to work in harmony. So you'd like it to draw attention, which you do by italicizing it, but a half a point less than the brand, so it works in harmony. Your brand leads the way, which determines almost every ounce of your value. Now, after the title, I like 4 points of space. Let's go back to that special line, Good Samaritan Village. Why is that there? Why is that there? Well, I lived in Florida 13 years before I escaped. And I can tell you every second or third mobile home or trailer park in Florida has the word village in it. Can't possibly have someone pick up this resume and go, amazing, amazing. Gosh, your career went into the toilet. What happened? This is the nation's largest non-for-profit long-term care organization. It's another significant employer. If the person sitting next to you, random person, has never heard of this employer, you need one of these qualifying lines to set its value. Otherwise, they just don't get it. If the person sitting next to you has heard of the organization, do not waste the space on this. That real estate belongs to your story. Here we need it. Now, the rest of it, let's talk about the bullet points. The bullet points are 8.5 in size. I can do the whole bullet point set at once, each bullet point set one time. Scroll over the bullet point set and do it all. But when I make it 8.5, it's going to get a little tight, a little hard to read. And while it's highlighted, I'm going to fix that right away. Screens to do it are coming up yet, but I'm just going to add 1.75 points of space after every single bullet. And suddenly the breathability comes back. So that's the basics of how we're going to adjust our resume to create all this spacing that suddenly makes things breathable, makes things come to life, makes it visually imprintable in their brain. Now, how do I add space? There's two ways to add space. One way is, of course, we're looking to add space between the lines. Another way is we may be looking to add space or even take space away between the characters. That's a different thing. So here, to add space between the lines, I'll go up under format, down to paragraph. Now, have to insert a slight little apology for Microsoft here because they make about 20 different versions and they all look different. This is how it works on mine. You need to look up logically how this works on yours based on this. So I'll get down to paragraph. Box is going to pop up that has a points after area. And I simply put the 2 or the 1.75 or the or after professional experience, which I like at 7-point bold with a little bit of gray. Same for education. So it disappears into the background. After those two labels, I like 8 points of space before the content. But you know, the employers, 2 points of space, the titles, 4 points of space afterward, the bullet points, 1.75 points of space. You get the idea. As long as you apply it consistently, you'll have a great outcome. But you may have one bullet point that's a little too long and it dips onto a second line or something like that, or one that's just a little too short and looks weird. So you may want to expand a line or contract a line, and you do it the same way under format. Now down to font. And in the font box that pops up, you simply click the advanced tab and you realize that it can either expand or contract the character spacing by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Suddenly it'll all look great. Let me get a little drink here. As we start it, don't want to set the expectation you're going to spend 2 hours and have the brand new resume. You'll have the first iteration of the new resume. If this is too intense for you to redevelop your own story, my gosh, work with someone that can really present a dazzling story for your career background. All my packages are over under the selfrecruiter.com page under the services tab. And if you need to talk before knowing which package is right for you, send me a quick email. We will set up a time to talk. Now, your work pedigree, strange word. If you're thinking dog food and horses, we got the right word. You may get the 3 to 5 seconds of the resume, but you may be somehow missing how we're valuing that. We're looking at the quality of these companies, looking at the titles and accomplishments, even though I said I wouldn't look at those things, and the educational background. And here's your proof. This is the world's simplest resume. Todd Smith, Nestle USA, Director of Quality Assurance, Kraft Foods, Quality Assurance Manager, Coca-Cola Company, Quality Assurance Engineer, Education, University of Florida, BS in Agriculture. I mean, value everywhere, but nowhere to be seen. Let's imagine you have that you are the boss that has to hire that person, yet you only got one spot left, one interview spot left, and you got this Todd person, and someone else, Todd and the other person. And, you know, they have the same director to manager individual to director to manager, manager, director. They have all that same track record. They have the same University of Florida BS in Agriculture, but they did it for 3 food and beverage companies you've never heard of. Let's see who's going to get that last interview spot. Todd or the other one? Todd or the other one? There's no question here. Todd gets this interview every single time. So what you put under those titles is where you're going to either win it or lose it. These achievements have to be bullet pointed so it can be tangible and absorbed very, very quickly on all your deliverables, all your value points. That means, center the story around these elements. Overall, it's about somehow showing performance. What are you doing? What are you doing? Take a look at these here. Again, just another idea of how to draw attention. Let's go to education for a second. Degrees of degrees. Have you received in hand your college degree? I know it's a very strange way to ask. The only thing that matters is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You know what? If you didn't pay that $168 that you still owed, you know what that is? No degree. If you're 3 credits shy of what's required, you know what that is? No degree. Don't lose an opportunity simply because you lie about education. Put your university or college, put your coursework toward field of study, just not a coursework toward BS and whatever. That is too close to baloney. There cannot be any perceived 3-card Monty going on with your education. Just put what you have achieved, what you did do, and let the rest fly. What you're eventually selling is not some silly decision you may have made 10, 20, even longer ago, years ago about your education. It's what you've built up in your career. A few words about designing your resume, although you've had a lot of them today. It's about moving your brand forward. Being able to visualize what you do in your career. Why is your contribution valuable? Also, of course, they have to see this educational background. A last word about Word. Yes, I produce my resumes in Word because that's what's expected, but would never send a Word document on any job I was ever going after. Watch my Headless Horseman video over on my YouTube site. It'll walk you through it. Once you do all this work to make your resume perfect, if you dare send that Word document, you have no idea what it actually looks like when it arrives. It reflows completely based off their preferences file. So when you get all done making it perfect, change it over to a PDF, and it'll be perfect on the other end. Controlling your brand, controlling your presence. Wherever you are in reinventing your career story, take your first step and learn how to repeat, and get this engine going. If you need help, check out the Self-Recruiter website, check under the services tab. I'll be back here on Monday with my part 2 to this mini branding session, where we'll take what we learned today on resume and we're going to transfer that over to LinkedIn to develop it into a full 3-dimensional sales brochure. Tuesday, of course, we're going to do an Ask Self-Recruiter live Q&A, all on career branding issues. Hope you guys join in. And whether you're joining me on LinkedIn Live, over on my YouTube Self-Recruiter channel, or over on my Facebook, I hope you do like and comment and share and message and all those kind of fun things. Ring the bell. And thank you guys for joining in. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.